Nintendo is known for putting out some pretty great, consistent stuff. I just got done playing Pikmin 4, and man, what a game. Ochi made traveling the different worlds a lot of fun. I actually really like the Dandori battles and trials, and it still has that Pikmin charm we've come to love. If we went back a couple years though, the last Pikmin game sure was interesting. Alright, before I talk about Hey Pikmin, we need to talk about the term black sheep, because it has a really negative connotation. If you Google the term black sheep, you get a member of a family or group who is a disgrace to it. Come on, Hey Pikmin isn't that bad. When I use the term black sheep, I'm referring to a game that stands out from the rest of the series. It could be super different, it could be too ambitious, it could be a bunch of things. Let's take the Super Mario Bros. Series for example. Out of the first 3, 2 is usually considered the black sheep because it's very different. And it's a Doki Doki reskin, but it's still a super fun game. So just because I call a game a black sheep doesn't necessarily mean I dislike it or think it's a bad game. For the most part. Pikmin, since its creation, has always been an open world game about managing your resources, collecting treasure and ship parts, and it's a big race against the clock to make your days as effective as possible. Hey Pikmin removes the Z-axis, removes the time limit, and removes a good chunk of the resource management. This game definitely does some cool things, but I think they changed a little too much, and it starts to feel not like a Pikmin game. Personally, I don't think Pikmin in 2D could ever be as good as Pikmin in 3D. While Mario has its 2D and its 3D, they both work because they're trying to accomplish different things. 2D Mario is mostly about reaching the end goal. Castle, flagpole, whatever it is, you're going from point A to point B. 3D Mario is all about collecting, in pretty much any order you want. Sure, there's usually a loose level list, but for the most part you could go to 1 to 3 to 6 to 5, any order you want, there's a lot of freedom. Hey Pikmin isn't trying to do that. It's trying to make 3D Pikmin work in a 2D space, and I think that's why the game suffers so much. There's still a very strong emphasis on collecting ship parts, sparklium treasure, like you would in normal Pikmin. But it doesn't feel as important to collect treasure, because no matter what, you have to complete every level in the game. Let's look at Pikmin 1 for example. If you collect only what you need to make the ship run, Olimar barely launches into orbit and he makes it home. If you get less than what's needed, Olimar tries to take off, he crashes, and he's turned into a Pikmin. And if you collect everything, you get the best ending where he triumphantly takes off. This gives a little bit of weight to collecting items, so you're not just collecting to collect. And it's like this in every Pikmin game, except for Hey Pikmin. It's sort of like the illusion of free will when you're collecting stuff. Sure, it's nice to collect everything you see, and it feels good to 100% a game sometimes, but there's not that meaning behind it like the other Pikmin games have. And yeah, technically you need 30,000 Sparklium, but let's be honest, if you're playing this game even casually, you're gonna hit the number. It's mostly just about completing levels, and it's a lot different from what Pikmin really is. I think this is one of the best examples of a black sheep. It stands out so much from the other games in the series, and it's not necessarily a bad game, but it's nothing like these others. Hey Pikmin was clearly a product of the failure of the Wii U. From the span of 2012 to 2016, the 3DS was doing most of the heavy carrying. In the latter half of this lifespan, we got some really weird 3DS games. Wii U ports, Hey Pikmin, and it's also how we got a game like this. Honestly, Chibi Robo Ziplash is more of a black sheep of pretty much all Nintendo games rather than its series. Because let's be honest here, Chibi Robo has had a really rough time ever since his first game. I love Chibi Robo. It is the peak of that weird and ambitious stuff the GameCube era was full of. But man, everything else in this series is nowhere close to this game. Park Patrol, while being a really interesting game, was held back by some of the worst marketing of all time and being a Walmart exclusive. Not really known for being the best place to buy video games. I vividly remember being in elementary school when this game came out, and I got a scratch and sniff bookmark for this game, which was kind of cool, but it had no influence on me to actually ask my parents to buy this game. And that's pretty much it, except for Ziplash. You can say what you want about Big N, but they are really good at doing gimmicks. Platformers, adventure games, shooters, no matter what the genre is, they typically usually have pretty fresh and fun takes. And even within franchises, stuff is not staying the same that long. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 are the only games that are kinda similar to each other in the 3D space. Zelda has a pretty much new gimmick every 3D iteration. They surely are not known as putting out basic repetitive stuff. But that's exactly what Ziplash is. It pretty much has no identifying features. It's just the guy and his whiplash. You could put any character in this spot, and it'd feel like the same thing. Lifeless. I genuinely cannot name a single thing this game does that I haven't seen before. It's really disappointing to see something like this come out. It was only made to sell amiibo, and I'm 99% sure that's probably the only reason people bought this game. One day in the future, I know we're gonna get a good Chibi Robo game, just like how it started. But for now, this is our last memory of him, and he's just a big black smudge on the history of Nintendo games. Pikmin and Chibi Robo are debatably pretty niche when it comes to Nintendo series. Like, if they take a risk on one of these IPs, it's okay because it's not going to do the same damage as they would if they took a risk like this on Mario. But they do sometimes take these risks, like with Zelda. They have been trying to make multiplayer Zelda work as long as the GameCube, and it is always held back by one thing or another. A lot of people will tell you that Four Swords Adventures is held back by its technology. To play that game with multiplayer, you need 4 Game Boys and 4 link cables, which isn't exactly easy to conjure up. But with Triforce Heroes, I think it shows that isn't the issue with multiplayer Zelda. It honestly wasn't really hard to find 2 other people with a 3DS in 2015. It was the most popular Nintendo console at the time. The main issue with multiplayer Zelda is how the puzzles work. Zelda 2D and 3D are all about puzzle solving in the dungeons. Usually, you solve a couple puzzles, you find the main item, and then all the puzzles after that revolve around using your new item. A Link Between Worlds switched this up by letting you buy whatever item whenever you wanted, and this really switched up how dungeons worked in those games. Triforce Heroes is built with that same ideology as Link Between Worlds, but instead of items, it's costumes. Each player can put on their own costume, and it's pretty cool, but I think a lot of the puzzles suffer from this. Honestly, I don't think I could tell you a single puzzle from Triforce Heroes. Actually, the only one I remember is the totem puzzle, and I'm not even sure you can call that a puzzle. Things have to be designed in a certain way that you're able to accomplish your goal without a necessary item. This leaves a lot of the puzzles feeling really generic. Majora's Mask, I could tell you pretty much every dungeon and how they worked, and I could tell you the highlights of pretty much every other Zelda game. Triforce Heroes' identity is being a multiplayer game, and if you can get a group together, it's a great time. But even if you get a group of people together to play, I've seen people have issues online and locally, to the point where people are disconnecting. But it's 2023, none of my friends have 3DSs, so you're probably gonna have to play this game alone. And oh my god, is it terrible alone. Having to swap back and forth and back and forth and back and forth for these puzzles is draining. Most of these levels take about 10 to 20 minutes, but when you do it alone, it takes like 30 minutes. Four Swords had this right on the GameCube. It's really weird to say, but this is the worst multiplayer Zelda game. Overall, this is easily the worst single-player Zelda experience, and the multiplayer leaves a lot to be desired. It's no wonder this game sold so poorly, and it's one of the least played entries in the series. Above all else, there's one 3DS game that's the worst of them all, the blackest of the black sheeps. It takes the worst aspects of all these games and combines it into one. A traditional single-player franchise turned into multiplayer co-op, sucked of its core fundamental values and everything it was built upon, and making just this lifeless, bland experience. It's not only the weakest part of a franchise, but it also tarnishes the name of one of my favorite trilogies of all time, Metroid Prime Federation Force. I have never been more disappointed and hurt by such a lifeless cash grab. The Prime trilogy is considered one of the best trilogies in all of gaming, and to put that label on this, it's just disrespectful. I honestly wasn't even sure this was a Metroid game until the logo popped up telling me it was. None of this feels like Metroid to me. I hate these things. They feel like lifeless Call of Duty space bots that were supposed to be placeholders and somehow snuck their way into the end of the game. The sound direction is off. It feels like a Twilight episode of a Metroid game. This game for me really highlights how out of touch Nintendo was during this era. It really seemed like they had no idea why anyone enjoyed playing their games. Metroid's strongest aspect has always been its interconnected world building. It was never about going from point A to point B, and it never felt like that. It always felt like you were exploring a planet for the first time. And while you were traversing this new planet, you found new gear. You upgraded your tech. You felt like you were growing alongside this world. And Federation Force has none of this. If you told me that this game was originally not developed as a Metroid game, I would 100% believe you, because it feels like nothing is connected to that game other than some enemy types. The multiplayer system also feels very, very weak, especially compared to Triforce Heroes. For the most part, there are 3 classes: a healer, a tank, things like that. Nobody wants to play as the healer, ever. That is the shortest stick in gaming. All you do pretty much is shoot out energy tanks. It's awful. And at the end of every level, you get these things called mod chips, and you're fighting to get the best ones. It's an awful system. The multiplayer gameplay too is just not that fun. This honestly feels like a round of Call of Duty Zombies, but like one of the first rounds. Like there's no challenge to it at all. What happened? Ziplash, I at least can see appeals to people who want to buy amiibo like me. I have no idea who this game appeals to. Definitely not me, and I can't imagine most Metroid fans are bringing this up as their favorite Metroid game. This, to me, in my mind, is what pops up when you say the term Black Sheep. A game that doesn't respect or fit in with the rest of its franchise and will forever be remembered as a low point for the series. The 3DS was full of a lot of great ideas, and even some of the games I talked about are still fun games. But even Nintendo can fly too close to the sun, and we can only hope and pray that we never see another Ziplash in our lifetimes. But the real takeaway from this video: never play Federation Force. And you don't seem to